What's the best parting gift that you left for your teacher? The last week of my senior year, I decided I wasn't going to leave quietly, not because I hated my teachers. Actually, because I loved them. Especially my chemistry teacher, Mrs. Parker. She'd survived 4 years of me asking ridiculous questions like, what if we accidentally invent a dinosaur? Or, can I get extra credit for not setting the lab on fire? She always laughed, mostly. So when my family announced we were moving across the country the day after graduation, I decided Mrs. Parker deserved one final memory. Monday morning, I walked into class carrying an enormous cardboard box. She narrowed her eyes immediately. What is that? A class project. We don't have a class project. Exactly. She sighed. I already don't like where this is going. Inside the box were 100 tiny rubber ducks. Every single one had a different facial expression. Before class started, I secretly hid them everywhere. Inside cabinets, on the projector, behind textbooks, balanced on ceiling pipes. Even one wearing safety goggles inside the emergency eye wash station. Mrs. Parker didn't notice a thing until halfway through class. A student opened a drawer. Duck. Everyone laughed. 5 minutes later, another student found one inside the supply closet. Duck. Mrs. Parker looked confused. By the end of the period, 12 ducks had been discovered. She crossed her arms. Emily, I know this was you. I smiled. You can't prove anything. The next day, she walked into class and immediately spotted another duck sitting in her coffee mug. She removed it without saying a word. Then another appeared inside the attendance folder. Then one taped underneath her chair. She looked genuinely concerned. How many of these things are there? I shrugged. Enough. By Wednesday, the entire school knew about the mystery ducks. Teachers from other classrooms started bringing found ducks back to Mrs. Parker. The principal found one wearing a tiny paper tie inside the front office. The librarian discovered 3 reading library books. Even the janitor found one riding the floor cleaning machine. Mrs. Parker announced, if anyone finds another duck, don't tell me. I've accepted my fate. By Thursday, students I'd never even met were helping hide the remaining ducks between classes. It had become a full school operation. Friday, my very last day, Mrs. Parker stopped me at the classroom door. I know this isn't over. I smiled innocently. What isn't? She shook her head. I've taught for 26 years. I've never lost a battle with a student. I reached into my backpack. She sighed dramatically. Another duck? I handed her a framed certificate. It read, Official Duck Detection Champion. Ducks found 97. She laughed so hard she had to sit down. Then she looked at me. Wait, 97? I nodded. Her smile slowly disappeared. There were more. I just waved goodbye and walked out. 3 months later, I got an email from one of my friends. Subject line, she found another one. Attached was a picture of Mrs. Parker holding duck number 98. She looked both exhausted and impressed. A year after graduation, I came back to visit. The first thing Mrs. Parker said wasn't, how have you been? It was, I found number 99 during summer cleaning. Then she leaned across her desk and whispered, I'm never finding number 100, am I? I smiled. Probably not, she laughed. You are absolutely impossible. Then I finally told her the truth. Duck number 100 was never in the classroom. I had hidden it inside the clear plastic cover of her classroom clock. She looked up, stared at the clock for about 5 seconds, then burst out laughing before climbing onto a chair to take it down. 2 years, that duck had been silently watching every chemistry class. Mrs. Parker still has all 100 ducks lined up across a shelf in her classroom. Every new student asks why they're there. She always smiles and gives the same answer. They're from one student who somehow turned my classroom into the longest game of hide and seek in school history. And honestly, I can't think of a better graduation gift than making my favorite teacher laugh for 2 whole years after I was gone. What's the funniest thing my daughter said during my labor? By the time I got to the hospital, I'd already decided I was never doing this again. I was 9 months pregnant with our second baby, contractions 5 minutes apart, and my husband Ethan kept saying things like, "You're doing amazing," which was sweet, but also made me want to throw a pillow at him. Our 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, had begged to be there. She'd watched every big sister video on YouTube and proudly announced, "I'm mature enough to witness childbirth." I wasn't convinced, but the hospital had approved it, and she refused to miss the biggest day of her life. Fast forward 12 hours. I'd been in labor forever. The nurse smiled and said, "You're finally at 10 centimeters. I asked. Out of, she smiled wider. 10, great. I'd officially unlocked the final boss. The doctor walked in. "Okay, Mom, on the next contraction, give me your biggest push." I grabbed the bed rails with both hands. The contraction hit. I screamed so loudly the monitor actually shook. Sophie slowly looked around the room before whispering, "Is she okay?" My husband nodded. "She's just in pain." Sophie tilted her head. I thought people only made those sounds in zombie movies. The nurse had to bite her lip to stop laughing. Another contraction slammed into me. I pushed again. The doctor encouraged me. "Perfect. Keep going." Sophie looked horrified. Wait, this is the good part? Everyone laughed. Except me. I was too busy reconsidering every decision I'd ever made. A few minutes later, the doctor smiled. I can see the baby's head. Sophie's eyes got huge. "Already?" She leaned forward just enough to peek, then immediately covered her mouth. Oh, there was a long silence. Finally, she whispered, "I thought babies came out looking newer?" Even I laughed through the pain. The doctor calmly explained that newborns sometimes look a little squished at first. Sophie nodded seriously. "So, he's downloading his face?" The resident doctor completely lost it. He had to turn around because he was laughing too hard. Another push. Another scream. I accidentally grabbed my husband's wrist so hard he yelped. Sophie looked at him. "Dad, you did this. You should probably apologize." He immediately said, "I'm so sorry." I yelled, "Not good enough." The entire delivery room burst into laughter. Finally, one last push. A tiny cry filled the room. The nurse placed my son on my chest. I immediately started crying. He was perfect. Sophie stepped closer. She studied him from every angle. Then she frowned. "Why does he look like a tiny old man?" The doctor smiled. "Most newborns do." She nodded thoughtfully. "So he'll grow into being a baby?" Nobody could answer because everyone was laughing again. A little later, while the nurses were measuring him, Sophie quietly walked over. She stared at the scale. 7 pounds? She looked back at me. "Mom, you've been carrying around a bowling ball, even through the exhaustion." I couldn't stop laughing. About an hour later, things finally settled down. The room was quiet. My son was asleep. I thought the comedy show was over. Then Sophie climbed onto the chair beside my bed. She gently held her baby brother's tiny hand. For the first time all day, she was completely silent. I asked, "So, what do you think?" She looked at him for a long moment, then at me. "I think you were way braver than I thought." I felt tears filling my eyes. Then she smiled. "But if Dad ever asks you for another baby," blink twice. The nurse laughed so hard she nearly dropped her clipboard. My husband buried his face in his hands. I told Sophie, "I don't think that's going to happen." She shrugged. "Good. Because after watching today, I've decided I'm never having kids." My husband laughed. "So what's your plan?" She answered without missing a beat. "I'm just going to skip to the fun part. We'll adopt a 10-year-old." Then she looked at her sleeping baby brother one last time and added, "They already know how to use the bathroom. And hopefully they won't come out looking like a grumpy potato." The entire room exploded with laughter. Even my doctor wiped tears from her eyes. To this day, whenever someone asks my daughter what it was like watching her little brother be born, she always gives the exact same answer. It was beautiful, but I learned that babies are basically tiny screaming potatoes, and moms are actual superheroes.